You see those walls behind you right now? They are bleeding money. Every single hour, every single day of the year. While you sleep, while you eat dinner, while you pay another $400 heating bill that climbs higher than the last one, the money is pouring out. 25 to 40% of every dollar you spend heating that house, gone through the walls. And the utility company knows it, but there is a fix. It costs about $8. It comes from a tradition older than the United States itself. And the families who use it heat their homes all winter on a third of the firewood their neighbors burn. The first time I walked into a farmhouse outside Millersburg, Ohio, it was 12 degrees outside. No furnace, just a wood stove. And that house was warmer than mine. The answer was not the stove, the answer was inside the walls. And what I am about to share with you came out of a 2015 USDA Forest Products Laboratory study, a Lancaster County building tradition, and a single forgotten paragraph in a barn-raising journal from 1847. If you already own your home, especially one built before 1980, this is exactly the video you needed to find. Don't click away, because what the heating industry has known for 40 years and never told you is going to make you angry, and then it is going to save you a fortune. Let me tell you what I saw the first winter I spent paying close attention. I had just finished writing a check for $412 to the gas company. February bill. My house was built in 1972. Decent insulation, or so I thought. Newer windows. A furnace that was only 9 years old. On paper, I was doing everything right. But the bill kept climbing, and the house never quite felt warm enough. My wife kept a sweater on the back of every chair. I kept the thermostat at 68 and felt guilty every time I bumped it to 70. That was when an old friend of mine, a man who had spent 40 years doing finish carpentry around Lancaster County, asked me a question I will never forget. He said, "When was the last time you actually looked at how your walls were put together? Not the drywall, not the studs, the way the air moves through them." I did not have an answer. Most people do not. Because the truth is, the average American house built between 1,950 and 1,990 leaks air at a rate that would horrify the men who built barns 200 years ago. The USDA Forest Service, in a peer-reviewed study published in the journal Buildings in 2015, looked at moisture and air performance in conventional wood frame walls across mixed humid climates. The lead authors, Samuel Glass and Vladimir Kochkin, documented something the heating industry has known quietly for decades. Air leakage accounts for between 25 and 40% of total heat loss in a typical home. Not the windows, not the attic, the walls themselves. And every cubic foot of warm air that escapes is replaced by a cubic foot of cold air that your furnace has to heat all over again. That is what they mean when they say your house is leaking money. It is not a metaphor. It is a measurement. Now, the building industry will tell you the solution is to tear out your walls, install spray foam, replace your siding, hire a crew, take out a loan, and write a check for $15,000 or $20,000. That is one path, but it is not the path the Amish ever took. Because the Amish, in the communities I have spent time in across Holmes County and Lancaster County, solved this problem before electric meters were even invented. They solved it with their hands, with cheap materials, with a technique that any homeowner with a ladder and a Saturday afternoon can apply right now, and the materials cost about $8 per wall section. I know that sounds impossible. I thought so too, until I watched it done with my own eyes. So let me take you back to where this knowledge actually came from, because the story matters. The Amish settlers who came to Pennsylvania in the early 1700s did not have furnaces. They did not have insulation as we know it. What they had was a tradition carried over from the Palatinate region of Germany, refined through brutal winters in the Alleghenies, and passed down through barn-raising notes that most historians have never read. There is a journal entry from a Lancaster County builder named Jacob Hostetler, dated November of 1847, that describes a sealing technique used between the inner planking and the outer cladding of a farmhouse wall. He called it the breath line. The idea was simple, but the execution was very specific. You take a paste, made from common ingredients available on any farm-boiled linseed oil, fine wood ash, and a small amount of beeswax, and you press it into every joint, every gap, every place where two pieces of wood meet inside the wall cavity. Not the surface. The interior seams, the places air actually moves through. The paste hardens into a flexible seal that expands and contracts with the wood through the seasons. It does not crack like modern caulk. It does not off-gas. It does not need to be replaced every 5 years. And the cost, in $1847, was almost nothing. Today, you can buy the modern equivalent, a high-quality linseed oil-based sealant for about $8 per tube at any rural hardware store. One tube seals a substantial section of wall. Most homes need between 3 and 6 tubes total to seal the major leak points. That is the $8 fix. That is what stops the bleeding. Now here is what they never tell you. The reason this works so well is not magic, it is physics. When you stop air movement inside a wall cavity, you also stop the moisture transport that causes insulation to lose its effectiveness. A wall full of fiberglass bats that is leaking air is performing at maybe 40% of its rated R value. Seal that air movement, and suddenly your existing insulation starts performing the way the label on the package promised. You did not need new insulation, you needed to stop the air. Peter, an air barrier specialist quoted in a Green Building Advisor article on Amish construction methods, put it plainly. He said, "When air leaks, it carries moisture with it, a double penalty." That is the secret the heating industry would rather you never figure out. Because once you understand that air leakage is the problem, the entire model of upselling you on bigger furnaces and more insulation falls apart. You do not need more. You need to fix what you already have, and someone somewhere has been very comfortable letting you believe otherwise. Now I want you to think about something for a minute, because this is where the story gets uncomfortable. The information I just shared with you has been sitting in plain sight for decades. The 2015 USDA Forest Service study is publicly available. The 2014 joint research project between APA and the Forest Products Laboratory in Madison, Wisconsin, conducted by C.R. Boardman, Samuel Glass, and Robert Munson, confirmed every single one of these findings. They specifically documented that uncontrolled air leakage is the primary driver of moisture accumulation in wall assemblies. They published the data, they wrote the reports. The reports went into government archives and university libraries, and the average American homeowner has never heard a word of it. Why? Because the heating industry, the insulation manufacturers, and the contractors who profit from full wall replacements have absolutely no financial reason to tell you that an $8 fix can do most of what a $12,000 renovation does. There is no commission on a tube of sealant. There is no quarterly bonus for telling a homeowner he can fix his own walls in a weekend. The economic incentive of the entire residential construction industry is pointed in exactly the opposite direction, toward complexity, toward expense, toward dependency. The Amish never bought into that system. They never had to. Their economy is built on doing things once, doing them right, and not paying anyone for what you can do yourself. When I sat down at a kitchen table in Holmes County with a man named Eli, a builder in his 60s who had framed somewhere north of 200 homes in his life, he told me something I have never forgotten. He said, "The English think a house is a product. We think a house is an inheritance, and you do not let an inheritance leak. You patch it, you seal it, you take care of it." That is the mindset that produces a wall that lasts 150 years without a heating bill problem. That is the mindset that we as a country have somehow lost. But here is the thing. You can get it back. You can apply it to the house you already own. You do not need to be Amish. You do not need to know a builder. You do not need to spend $15,000. You need a tube of sealant, a stepladder, and one Saturday. And in the next section, I am going to walk you through exactly how to do it, even if your house was built 50 years ago. Now, if you already own a house and you are thinking this only applies to people building from scratch, stay with me, because this next part is specifically for you. The technique I am about to describe was developed by Amish renovators in Lancaster County for retrofitting older farmhouses without tearing the walls open. They called it edge sealing, and it is the single most cost-effective home improvement I have ever personally seen. Here is what you do. You start in your basement or your crawl space if that is what you have. You take a flashlight and you look up at the rim joist, that is the band of wood that runs around the perimeter of your house, sitting on top of the foundation, where the floor joists end. In almost every American home built before the year 2000, this rim joist area is the single biggest air leak in the entire structure. It is where the cold winter air pours in. It is where your warm air escapes. It is the chimney effect that pulls heat out of your living room and pumps it straight into the sky. The Amish technique is to take that linseed-based sealant, or in modern applications, a high-quality acoustical sealant or a polyurethane caulk works just as well, and run a continuous bead along every seam. Where the rim joist meets the foundation, where the floor joist meets the rim joist, where the subfloor meets everything, every single seam. You do not skip any. This will take you about 2 hours and cost you between $20 and $40 in materials. That is it. The next stage is to go upstairs and find every electrical outlet on an exterior wall. Take the cover plate off. You will probably find a gap around the outlet box. That gap goes all the way through your wall to the outside. Air pours through it, moisture pours through it, bugs pour through it. You take a small tube of fire-rated sealant and you fill that gap. Replace the cover plate, move to the next outlet. 20 outlets in a typical house. 20 minutes of work. The third stage is the one nobody talks about. You go to your attic. You look down at where the top of your interior walls meets the attic floor. In most homes, there is a gap there, sometimes a 1/4 inch, sometimes more, between the top plate of the wall and the drywall. That gap is a direct vertical chimney from your living space into your unconditioned attic. Every BTU your furnace produces is being pulled up through those gaps. Seal them. The same $8 tube of caulk. Run it along every top plate you can reach. Department of Energy field studies on air sealing retrofits document reductions of 15 to 30% on winter heating costs, and I have personally watched homeowners hit those numbers in a single weekend doing nothing more than these 3 steps. No new windows, no new furnace, no new insulation, just stopping the air movement that was making everything else they owned perform poorly. The math on this is staggering. If your annual heating bill is $2,400, a 25% reduction puts $600 back in your pocket every single year for the rest of your life in that house. For an investment of about $40 in one Saturday, that is a return on investment that no stock, no bond, and no savings account in America can match. And it is sitting right there inside your walls waiting for you to take it. The reason most people never do is because nobody told them it was possible. The reason nobody told them is because nobody profits from telling them, but you know now. And that changes everything about the rest of this winter, and every winter after it. Here is where the story takes a turn that I did not expect when I first started researching all of this. Because once you start sealing your house properly, you run into a problem the Amish solved 200 years ago, and almost no modern builder understands. The problem is moisture. When you stop air from moving through your walls, you also stop air from carrying moisture out of your walls. Modern building science calls this the dew point problem. If you seal a house too tight without thinking about where the water vapor goes, you can actually create conditions for mold and rot inside your walls. This is the genuine, legitimate concern that the building industry uses to scare homeowners away from doing this work themselves. They will tell you that you need a vapor barrier, a smart membrane, a ventilation system, an HRV, an ERV, a dehumidifier, a whole expensive ecosystem of products. And in some climates and some homes, some of that is true, but the Amish figured out a far simpler answer in the 1800s, and it still works. They built their walls to breathe in one direction only. The interior side was sealed against air movement, but allowed slow vapor transmission through the natural materials. The exterior side was completely open to vapor wood siding with a small ventilated air gap behind it, no plastic, no synthetic membrane. Moisture that found its way into the wall cavity could always escape outward, never trapped. There was a discussion on a building science forum in 2024, homeowners watching an Amish crew install insulation in a barn-dominium roof, and one homeowner pointed out that the vapor barrier was on what he thought was the wrong side. A builder named Jared Becknell responded with something that stuck with me. He said, "The Amish know what they are doing. The vapor barrier goes on the warm side, but only if the building is being heated right away." If the building will sit unfinished for a season, they put it differently to prevent condensation from forming inside the assembly. They were not making mistakes. They were applying knowledge most modern builders have completely forgotten. The point is this: when you seal the air leaks in your home using the technique I described, you are not creating a moisture trap. You are working with the natural assembly of your existing walls, which were built even by conventional builders with enough exterior breathability to handle reasonable interior moisture levels. The problem in modern homes is not that they breathe too little, it is that they breathe in the wrong way. Air leaks through random gaps, carrying excessive moisture into cold cavities, where it condenses on the back of the sheathing and rots out the framing. Stop the air leaks and you stop the random moisture transport. The slow, steady vapor diffusion through your drywall is something your house was always designed to handle. Now, if your house has unusual conditions, a damp basement, no exterior ventilation gap, a known moisture problem, then you take it slower, you address those issues first, and you bring in a building science consultant before you go full Amish. But for the vast majority of American homes built between 1950 and 2000, the simple sealing techniques I described will reduce your heating bill, improve your comfort, eliminate cold drafts, and never cause a single moisture problem. The Amish know this. The USDA Forest Service knows this. The Forest Products Laboratory in Madison, Wisconsin has the data documenting it, and now you know it too. Which brings me to the one piece of the puzzle that ties everything together, the thing I was not going to share at first. The technique that turned the $8 fix from a small improvement into something that genuinely changes a house forever. Before I give you that final piece, one quick thing. Everything I have been digging out of these old extension bulletins and these Amish farmhouses, the breath line you just learned about, the rim joist sealing, the outlet trick, the attic top plate fix, the stube wall from the heating video, the cotton muslin from the attic video, the 4-ingredient paste from the toothpaste video, and all the other pieces I have pulled out of Lancaster County and Holmes County over the years. I have put it all in one place, room by room, season by season, in the order the families actually use it. It is called the Amish Home System. Link is in the description, but stay right here, because what was buried in that 1923 farm bulletin out of Berks County, Pennsylvania, is one thin strip of raw sheep's wool tucked behind a baseboard that almost no American homeowner has ever heard of. This is the part I almost did not include, because once you know it, you cannot unknow it, and you will look at every house you walk into for the rest of your life differently. I found this in a single paragraph buried in a Pennsylvania state extension document from the early 1980s, referencing an even older agricultural bulletin from 1923. The bulletin documented a practice common among Amish and Mennonite builders in eastern Pennsylvania and described in farm journals going back to the late 1800s. They called it the wool line. Here is what they did. After sealing the air leaks the way I described, they would take a thin strip of raw, untreated sheep's wool about 2 inches wide, about a ½ inch thick, and they would tuck it into the gap between the bottom plate of an interior wall and the subfloor, all the way around the perimeter of every room. Just a thin line of wool hidden behind the baseboard. That was it. The reason they did this is something that modern building science has only recently caught up to. Wool is a hygroscopic material. It absorbs moisture from the air when humidity rises and releases it back when humidity drops. It self-regulates. A thin strip of wool tucked along the bottom of every interior wall acts as a passive humidity buffer for the entire room. It pulls excess moisture out of the air in summer and releases stored moisture back in winter when the air gets dry from heating. The result is a house that maintains stable indoor humidity between 35 and 55%. The range medical research consistently identifies as ideal for human respiratory health without a humidifier, without a dehumidifier, without any electrical equipment of any kind. The Amish families I sat with in Lancaster County told me their grandparents would replace the wool every 20 or 30 years. Not because it stopped working, because they figured fresh wool was better. The original wool, when removed, was often still functioning perfectly. You can buy raw wool roving from any wool supplier or rural cooperative for about $12 per pound. 1 pound is enough to do an entire average-sized room. To retrofit this in an existing home, you do not need to tear up your floors. You pull off your baseboards, they pop off with a putty knife and a pry bar. In about 30 seconds each, you push the thin strip of wool into the gap between the bottom of the drywall and the subfloor, and you reinstall the baseboard. The wool sits there, completely invisible, doing its job for decades. Total cost for a typical 3-bedroom house, doing every room, somewhere between $40 and $70 in wool, plus 1 weekend of work. The effect on the house is something you have to experience to believe. The air feels different. Static electricity disappears in winter. Wood floors stop creaking. Furniture stops cracking. The house feels alive in a way that sealed, plastic-wrapped modern construction never does. This is the knowledge that was suppressed, not by some grand conspiracy, but by something almost worse, by industrial indifference. The companies selling humidifiers and dehumidifiers and HVAC controls had no incentive to tell anyone that a thin strip of sheep's wool tucked behind a baseboard could replace most of what their products were sold to accomplish. The Amish never forgot, because they never bought the products in the first place. The 1923 bulletin documenting this practice was written by an extension agent named, in some sources, A.J. Brubaker, working with farmers in Berks County, Pennsylvania. The technique was already old then. It had been carried over from German peasant construction practices going back to the Middle Ages. It survived in Amish country because the Amish kept building the way their grandfathers built. And now you have it, the breath line, the edge sealing, the wool, 3 techniques, about $100 total if you do the entire house. 1 weekend of work, and a home that performs in terms of comfort and air quality and energy efficiency the way homes were built to perform before someone decided that complexity was more profitable than wisdom. That is the $8 fix. That is what your walls have been waiting for. You are not behind. You are not late. You did not waste your money out of stupidity. You were never told the truth, and now you have it, and that changes everything about what comes next. The walls of your house are not going to leak money for one more winter unless you decide to let them. If you are the kind of man who believes that real knowledge has been quietly pushed aside to protect someone else's profit margin, then you already know what you are going to do this Saturday. You are going to walk down to your basement, you are going to look at that rim joist, and you are going to start sealing, and then you are going to come back and tell me what you found. Because every man who does this work finds the same thing, gaps so big you can feel the cold air pouring through them, and a quiet kind of anger that nobody told you about it for 30 years. Here is the question I want you to answer in the comments below. What year was your house built, and which of the 3 techniques, the rim joist sealing, the outlet sealing, or the wool line, are you going to try first? Tell me. I read every single one of these comments, and I am going to compile the responses into the next video where I share the techniques specific to homes built in different decades, because a house from 1958 has different leak patterns than a house from 1985, and the Amish builders I spoke with had specific approaches for each. If you want that breakdown, you need to subscribe right now, because the next video covers something I have been holding back: the way Amish families heat an entire 2-story farmhouse in January with about 1/3 of the firewood their English neighbors use, and the modification they make to a standard wood stove that almost no American homeowner has ever seen. That video is coming, and it builds directly on what you learned today. You are not just watching videos. You are joining a movement of men who are taking back the practical knowledge that should have been ours all along, the kind of knowledge our grandfathers had and our fathers somehow lost, the kind that does not depend on a utility company, a government program, or a contractor's invoice, the kind that lasts. Share this with one other man you know who has been overpaying for heat for too long. He will thank you. And next time we sit down together, we are going to walk into a Holmes County kitchen in the middle of January where it is 12 degrees outside, and the only sound you can hear is the soft tick of a wood stove that has not been refilled in 9 hours. Until then, go check your rim joist tonight. You are going to be amazed at what you find.